And good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you had an absolutely fantastic weekend. I am absolutely thrilled to report. I had to go to Tulsa last weekend to consult with a specialist about my pancreas. About 12 years ago, I had a severe attack of something, put me in the hospital for about 2 weeks, and finally they diagnosed it as a pancreatic attack. I have never in my life thrown up so violently and so painfully. I don't want to be crass here, but it was absolutely awful. And ever since then, every once in a while, I have an attack, if you please, of some sort, and it begins here in my solar plexus. And so my wife got an appointment with a specialist. We went up and we consulted with him. And needless to say, you've always got a little bit of concern if anything is related to the pancreas, because there's not just a whole lot they can do about a pancreas. Let's just face it. They're just nasty little things. So anyway, after consulting with him for a good long while, he said, at this point, I see no great cause for concern. We certainly have to keep an eye on it. And if the episodes get more frequent, if they get worse, then we certainly want to get you back in here and we want to do some testing. But he said, other than that, he said, I don't think we got a whole lot to worry about. And I'm just like, all righty. That sounds plenty good to me. But I just have to tell you, when one of those spells attacks, it is absolutely excruciating. I've had 13 kidney stones down through the years. And while I must confess that the pancreatic attack is not as severe, not quite as painful, it really reaches that threshold. And so it really is excruciating. So anyway, that's my medical report for here on Monday. And so anyway, thanks again for joining me. We want to get right back into our study of the Olivet Discourse. And we have been focused on the parable of the absent master. In Matthew 25:14 and following, there was a certain man who was going to go away into a far country. And before he left, he gathered his servants around him and he dispensed talents to them. And he said, you take care of business until I return. And after a long time, he returned, gathered his servants around him, and took a reckoning. He engaged in a judgment. And so we are told this parable is about the end of time. This parable is exemplified, pictured, if you please, in Acts chapter 1, when Jesus, who is the nobleman, obviously, ascended into heaven, the far country. And since it says, after a long time, he would return, that long time period refers to the 2,000 years that have transpired since the ascension. Proving, therefore, that Christ will come back in a physical body, supposedly. Proving, therefore, that the Olivet Discourse is divided into two subjects, the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the end of time. But ladies and gentlemen, I suggest to you, and I've said this before, and today's video will be somewhat repetitious of what we have seen before, but I think it is absolutely so incredibly powerful and critical that we understand the relationship between Matthew 25:14 and following, Acts chapter 1, and the other parables that have to do with the absent master. Now, I'm not going to go over and I'm not going to exegete all of the other passages like Matthew chapter 21, 33 and following, about a man who had a vineyard, a king, and he let it out to servants, went away went away a long time. He came back at the time of the harvest in order to take a judgment, in order to gather the harvest. But those servants had killed his servants, his faithful servants, and they killed his son. And Jesus posed the question to the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Jews, the scribes gathered around. What will that master do when he comes? And he uses a form of the most common word that is used for Jesus' second coming. He uses elthi, form of erchomai. And those Pharisees uttered out of their own mouth their own destruction. He will utterly destroy those wicked husbandmen. And you just know Jesus was standing there going, yep, you're right. But the point of it is, ladies and gentlemen, in Matthew chapter 21, 33 and following, we do not have a parable of the absent master that is different from Acts chapter 1. We do not have a parable of the absent master that is different from Luke chapter 19, which we're going to focus on here momentarily. We have the exact same precise motif. So, to anticipate where we're going, the question therefore is, if in Matthew chapter 21, 33 and following, the return of the absent master would, and this is undeniable from the context, if the return of the absent master would be to destroy those wicked husbandmen who killed the son, and out of the mouth of Jesus and those Pharisees understood they were the wicked husbandmen. They were the ones to bear the brunt of the coming of the master, the return of the absent master. They understood he spoke of them. So, my question is, ladies and gentlemen, where's the hermeneutical principle for saying, well, yeah, in Matthew 25, 14 and following, we have the return of the absent master. Matthew 21, 33 and following, we have the return of the absent master, but they're different returns for different purposes. You know, it absolutely astounds me, ladies and gentlemen, the lengths to which futurists will go to rationalize their futurism, to justify their futurism. That little non-Latin term that I invented, argumentum ad desperatum, is absolutely applicable. Now, watch this. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus was going through Jericho. Now, this is really, really significant because this conjures up the concept of the second Exodus. I mean, after all, Jericho is the first city that the children of Israel encountered when they crossed the River Jordan to possess the, to possess the promised land, right? And when Jesus passed through Jericho, what happened? He went to the house of Zacchaeus, but he pronounced to Zacchaeus, "This day salvation has come to your house." Salvation. Folks, that's the kingdom of God. So now, as he spoke those things, he spoke another parable because that's the multitude. I mean, they've just heard Jesus at Jericho speak of the reality of salvation, which is nothing less than the kingdom. And so Jesus told another parable because it was near to Jerusalem, that is, Jericho was near to Jerusalem. They knew he was going there. They knew he had just proclaimed salvation, and their messianic fervor is at a fever pitch because they thought the kingdom of God would appear immediately. Well, the Greek word translated as immediately is parakrima. And it means right now, immediately. It's not the same word as soon, quickly, and shortly. Therefore, he said, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. So he called 10 of his servants, delivered to them 10 minas, said to them, do business until I come. But his citizens hated him, sent a delegation after him, saying, we will not have this man to rule over us. And so it was, when he returned, having received the kingdom, he commanded these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. And for time consideration, I'm going to stop right there. But I want to ask you a question. and by the way, very, very quickly, you need to know, in case you didn't, this parable is taken from real life. When Herod the Great died, Archelaus, his grandson, traveled to Rome to have Herod the Great's kingdom bestowed on him. That's the way things were done in the Roman Empire. You didn't just automatically inherit your father or grandfather's kingdom. Since your territory was under Roman authority, then you had to go to Rome, and there the emperor would bestow on you what he deemed he wanted to do. So when Herod the Great died, he was awful. Herod the Great was atrocious. But guess what? His grandson Archelaus was maybe worse. He just didn't have the authority as much as Herod did. So he goes to Rome to have the emperor bestow on him the kingdom. The Jews sent an embassage to Rome begging the emperor, we don't want this man to rule over us. Well, the emperor, Augustus, I believe that's right, reduced the size of the territory that he bestowed on Archelaus, but he did give him authority over Judea. And guess what happens? When he got back to Judea, he gathered his servants together. He gathered together all of the men that had gone to Rome to beg that he not be made king, and he killed them. Well, let's see. Here in Luke chapter 19, this king, this nobleman, went to receive the kingdom. He received the kingdom, and he came back to rule and to reign. He didn't come back to abdicate. And he gathered together his servants, who said, we will not have this man to rule over us. Verse 27, bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me. And Archelaus killed over 3,000 Jews. Now, ladies and gentlemen, is the going away of Luke chapter 19 the ascension of Acts chapter 1? Well, of course it is. Is it Christ going away into a far country to receive a kingdom? Well, of course it is. Acts chapter 2 says he ascended into the heavens, sat down on the right hand of the majesty, pardon me, in the heavens, seated on the throne of David. And he would return to rule and to reign. Just like Luke chapter 19. Now, who was it that when Christ went into the far country and the message and the message of his kingdom, the message of his rule began to be proclaimed, who was it who said, we will not have this man rule over us? And even when he was on trial in John chapter 19, when Pilate said, here's the king of the Jews, and they said, we have no king but Caesar. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Luke 19 being played out. So it raises that question, okay, if Luke chapter 19, not really but since Luke chapter 19 is a depiction of Jesus ascending to the Father, receiving the kingdom, to return in judgment of those who rejected his rule and his kingdom. And folks, you know who that was. That was the Jews. If Luke 19 is about that scenario and about that narrative, how do we divorce it from Acts chapter 1, where Jesus was going to and did ascend to the far country to receive the kingdom and to return? Those are the same, quote, stories, unquote. Luke 19, a parable. Acts chapter 1, a pragmatic story. But if Luke 19 and Matthew 21 and Matthew 22 and Mark 13, if Luke 19 is depicting in parabolic form what the angel said and what happened in Acts chapter 1, then that means the return of Christ in like manner in Acts chapter 1 was to be in AD 70. And that means the Olivet Discourse is not divided, unless you can prove that Luke 19 is a different absent master parable from that in Matthew 25. You know what? You can't prove that. It's not provable. And once again, that means the Olivet Discourse is not divided. That means the return of Christ, the nobleman, the king, the master, and Matthew 25, 14 and following, occurred in AD 70. Okay, we've got more. I'll see you on the flip side.